Guys, it is time for another AMA. I'm excited. Are you excited? You guys asked some great questions. Some of these are really entertaining. And if you want to ask questions that I will address in the next AMA, make sure you follow me on Instagram because that's where I'm pulling all these questions. Timestamps are in the description, but the categories, just ahead of time, they're gonna be financial, med school and residency, self-development, personal, health, relationships, food, cars. We got 8 categories, lots of questions, let's go. All right, financial. Is FIRE possible? For grad students and MDs, I feel they start late because of higher ed. So FIRE is financial independence retirement early. Essentially, the idea that you save enough money, live off of your investments, and then you don't have to work. You can retire much earlier than 65. The general consensus is that 3 to 4% per year of your investments is a reasonable draw rate that will sustain you for the rest of your life. So if you had $1 million in the bank, well, not in the bank, actually in investments, you would be able to live off of $30,000 to $40,000 pre-tax every single year. If you had $10 million, that would be $300,000 to $400,000 per year indefinitely. So can MDs and grad students do this? Like, absolutely, without a doubt. The issue is that if you're an MD, you're probably gonna graduate with debt, so you have kind of a late start in that sense. And well, as a PhD though, you generally get a stipend and you're not gonna have debt, which is great. The other thing though to keep in mind is that you're only gonna start your high income earning in your late 20s, early 30s, maybe even mid 30s, depending on your specialty. So I started med school at 21. The earliest I could have theoretically become a plastic surgeon would be 31, right? And then if I wanted to do a fellowship, 32, research year, 33. And the main thing to keep in mind is lifestyle creep. So a lot of these attendings, right? They're 30, 32, and they're like, yo, I've been grinding the last 10 years of my life. I deserve to splurge and live a little. I want that Benz, I want that new condo, I wanna go on some nice vacations. You deserve it, but the issue is that by doing that, you're eating into your savings rate, and as we know, the compounding effect, time is your best friend. So the earlier you invest and the more you invest, the more that's gonna pay dividends long term. So if you can avoid the lifestyle creep and keep living like a resident for a couple years longer and build those investments, then you're gonna be in a much better position to retire early and have financial independence. But yo, easier said than done. Question 2, how much do you earn per month? None of your damn business. But in all seriousness, I am actually very open with MEM's revenue. It's 3 of us that are working on MEM, and I actually make videos, which you can click on somewhere around here, that are very transparent about the revenue, how much money we're spending on the business, et cetera, et cetera. We're trying to hit 7 figures in revenue this year. We've hit 6 figures a few months ago, so we could probably hit 7 figures. Stay tuned for future videos on that. Next category, medical school and residency. I, as a student, seem to have a never-ending pile of work to do. How do you manage? That's normal. So it is, especially in medical school, very normal to feel constantly behind. In college, you can probably be on top of your stuff depending on your major and such, but in med school, you will be behind. That's normal. How to deal with it? Number 1, prioritize your higher yield, more important stuff over your lower yield. You don't need to learn every single fact, right? That's number 1. And number 2 is really focus on active learning strategies. So it's better to, let's say, use active learning and do 1 or 2 passes through material with those active strategies versus like 5 passes with passive learning strategies. So I talk a lot about the different types of learning and the common mistakes that people make on the Med School Insiders channel. So check the description for some links to those evidence-based study strategies. What was the worst part of med school? Share favorite memories in med school. Worst part of med school? Okay. 2 things are coming up. I don't know if these are necessarily the worst, but these are just the first things that come up. Number 1 is when I first started 3rd year, I was on internal medicine and I was paired up with this other girl in my class who was such a gunner, dude. She was like trying to undermine me and make me look bad and like know more about my patients than, I was like, yo, like why are we playing these games? Come on. That was just like stressful, like unnecessary stress. And I don't know, I'm a person that I find it really hard to relate why people do certain things like that. Anyways, that was just unnecessary and very annoying. And then the second thing that comes up is I did an away rotation to this program that, let's just say, has a more old school surgical training style. And one of the main guys there actually trained at UT Southwestern in plastics, which was like the best plastics program. Like a lot of the best, biggest names came from there. And then he went to this program and was training there, and that influenced the training system, right? So I remember this 1 week, it's a 4-week, 1 month long rotation, but this 1 week we were on triple call, which means plastic surgery call, if there's any emergencies, face call, hand call, triple call. And that week I literally worked between 18 and 19 hours every single day. I was sleeping literally 2 to 3 hours a night, and I was studying for the next day's cases. It wasn't healthy, it was stupid, and I was like, what's the point of this? This is just not sustainable. It's not healthy, right? This is just silly. I'm sure there's other things that I'm just not thinking of right now, but those are the first two. Favorite memories in med school? I had a lot of fond memories. Bumping Kanye in the anatomy lab, studying for our practicals with one of my good friends. Yeah, like the night before, like late into the night too. It was just fun. Like you're learning a lot, you're spending time with friends. It's like this shared struggle that brings you closer together. That's why a lot of fraternities will do hazing and the military and stuff like that too, because the shared struggle brings you closer. Yeah, actually studying with my friends, even not in the anatomy lab, but just in the med school, I had a good time. And then the one other thing, we had this animal party the first year in med school, and I'm not gonna go into the details, but I had this unicorn costume where I had like a bandana with an aluminum foil horn and a white dress shirt with a white tail I made out of some like, I don't know, undershirt or something. And that was just an epic night. Yeah, there's a lot of inside jokes and just unicorn madness that night. It was good times. Med students, they study hard, and then they party hard. 2 questions: factors you wish you considered when choosing a specialty, and if you had to go back, would you choose a more flexible specialty? Okay, I'll say it real quick. I love plastics, I have no regrets. It was the perfect specialty for me. For me, it was like plastics, and then like ortho, neurosurge, ENT, and then everything else non-surgical in terms of appeal, right? I just loved plastics. It was such a good fit. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I have no regrets with my choice. What I will say is that a lot of other people that I either mentor or just even my colleagues from med school, I think oftentimes when we're younger, especially in our mid-20s, we don't prioritize lifestyle enough. We don't actually think like, hey, what is this gonna be like when I'm 35, 40, 45, right? And I think if more people consider that, they may stay away from more challenging lifestyle specialties. And yeah, like still, I would not choose a more flexible specialty because plastic surgery was that appealing to me. Also with plastics, sure, residency is tough, but after residency, you can have a more chill lifestyle if you want, with a private practice, if you want. It's gonna be a grind at the beginning when you're first creating your patient base, your census, but after that, it could be more chill. I mean, ideally, if I could have done anesthesia, I would have, but like my personality and like, it wasn't a good fit for me, but I think anesthesia is fantastic, which actually brings up scope creep, which we'll get to shortly. Next, how to pass med school without stress, and is it normal to get queasy in surgery rotations? Does it go away? Can you still be a surgeon? Med school will be stressful. The question isn't how to avoid stress, the question is how do you deal with stress? There's like some great Bruce Lee quote, right, about not asking for an easier life, but like being able to handle greater stress. I'm totally butchering that. He said it way better, but the way you manage stress is not just a matter of getting through med school, it's about getting through life. Life is gonna be stressful. There's gonna be crazy things happening. Your family members are gonna die. You're gonna get diagnosed with an illness. Like crazy shit's gonna happen. Someone's gonna, backstab you. Dealing with stress, everyone does it differently. What I have found most helpful, mindfulness meditation, journaling, exercise, which includes stretching. I've been doing this stretching routine since like 2012 and it feels amazing. When I don't do it, if I miss a day, I feel way off. That helps me like release the tension in my body. Everyone has different things. Cycling and weights are also 2 big ones for me. So in terms of feeling queasy in surgery rotations, it seems like most people get over their queasiness during anatomy lab because you'll see your cadaver's face and then you'll see some nasty stuff that's dried up and really stinky, and most people get over it then. Some people will faint, sure, but just about everyone in my med school class got over it during anatomy lab. And if you're exposing yourself to surgery and you're still having issues, then maybe surgery just isn't a good fit for you, and that's totally fine. Thoughts on AMAs, hashtag stop scope creep. Scope creep is a serious issue, and I think one of the reasons it's happening more so than we would like is because physicians are so busy, they tend to be really bad at lobbying and like doing advocacy work. I think it's great that more and more physicians are paying attention to this and taking a stand for patient safety, because the main issue here is patient safety. Like, if you have literally 1/10 of the hours of a physician and you're practicing independently, probably shouldn't be practicing independently because that opens up a lot of risk for the patients. I actually have some videos on the Med School Insiders channel that will briefly touch on that, like the So You Want to Be a Nurse Practitioner video. What should we do in each year of pre-med to prepare for medical school? I created a course on this called the Pre-Med Roadmap to Medical School Acceptance. It's now in its 3rd major revision. It's super thorough. It goes over not just like the study strategies and like, oh, get your letters of recommendation at this time versus that time. Like that's the basic stuff. That's what everyone knows. You can research that online. That goes into not only that, but everything else as well, how to be a top performing student. So check the link if you want to look at that. Undergraduate research tips. When is the research course? When will you make the research course? Can you do more videos about medical research on YouTube? Yes, I want to do more research because it is something that it's really difficult, right? There's a lot of friction and a lot of it's hard to make it a smooth process and get a lot of research done in a short period of time. That is kind of a game that I practiced a lot and then eventually cracked the code to in medical school, and I published a silly number of publications, but it's not really something that I can do on a YouTube video, so I'm gonna create a course because it is very extensive, right? Like doing research isn't something you can watch in a 10, 20, 30-minute video. It's much more than that, so stay tuned, and if you want to hear about updates on that course, subscribe to my newsletter. Self-development. How to build grit and perseverance. I think the answer to this one is shockingly simple. Do hard things. It's the same thing with confidence. I hate the advice that, oh, just fake it till you make it, act confident and you'll eventually be confident. No, dude, you do that, you're gonna end up with imposter syndrome. That's why imposter syndrome is so common, or one of the reasons I believe. With grit and perseverance, you will be challenged by life, and I don't think you necessarily need to go seek out challenges unless, maybe you have a very easy life for whatever reason. But when you face these obstacles, you'll find strength within you that you didn't even know you had. You're like, oh shit, how the hell did I do that, Like there are things that I look back on now in my life and I'm like, how did I do that? If that happened right now, I don't think I could do that again. But in reality, yeah, I probably could. It's just that I haven't been tested to that limit again, right? So do hard things. How do you stay optimistic as it takes me months to get over a failure in an exam? It's all your internal dialogue, really. If you fail an exam and then you beat yourself up, think of this from a logical perspective. What is going to serve you better? If you feel really down on yourself, beat yourself up for weeks or months, or if you say, hey, that didn't work properly, I need to change something so I don't repeat that mistake. What can I change? And then you have the real conversation with yourself. One avenue is beating yourself up, beating up your ego, kind of having this pity party, right? The other is hey, you know what? I'm gonna have to face some things. I mean, these aren't gonna be the most difficult insights, and it's not gonna be as difficult when it comes to studying. It's gonna be primarily a matter of hey, I didn't prioritize my time, I'm not using the right study strategies, I'm not organized, etc. But sometimes you have to have more difficult conversations with conflicts with family members or relationships, right? Oh, hey, I wronged you in this way and I was acting this way and that was wrong. Being able to have those conversations will tremendously push your life forward in ways you can't even imagine. Any values that your parents instilled in you that you believe help you succeed, and most important principle in your life. Okay, these are kind of related. I think the most important principle, which kudos to my mom's the MVP for real. Mom, if you're watching this, I love you. You are amazing. It's only once I've gotten older that I realized how great my mom was, because I'm interacting with more and more adults. I'm like, oh wow, I would have ended up way different if I had a different mom. And the main thing is the belief in me. My mom had belief in me, which allowed me to also believe in myself, if that makes sense. And even when I was younger, if she disagreed with me on something, but I could rationally explain and logically say, hey, this is why I want to do X, Y, and Z. So, okay, this is a story I haven't told before. My mom caught me with marijuana when I was a sophomore in college. I had just started smoking weed, or rather more so vaping weed, not the cartridges. This is back when you had to hand grind it. Cartridges are actually very dangerous, ARDS, etc. Anyways, the reason I was trying it out was because my IBD, I had just been diagnosed, I was not well managed, and I had read about how marijuana could help. It helps with the nausea, it helps with the pain, it helps with the loss of appetite. And I was like, cool, let me try it. And then I definitely was not smoking very frequently, because what I realized is that I had to be high to get those benefits, and I did not want to be high all the time. So yeah, I actually barely touched weed at all. But the story I'm trying to tell here is when my mom caught me, I explained this to her. I was like, hey mom, look, don't worry, I'm crushing school, I'm studying really hard. This is not something I do every day. I'm trying to experiment and figure out what's gonna work for me and my gut. And my mom was like, cool, can I try it? I was like, yo, no. I wish I did. I wish I did get my mom high, but I had not. So then building off of that, I think the most valuable principle I have now, I mean, there's a few things, but I think the most important one would be you can learn anything. The idea that you become a doctor and then you're only gonna be clinical or whatever is silly. You can learn anything. You're smarter now than you were at 18. And at 18, you were able to do computer science, or you're able to do history or art or pre-med, biology, whatever. You can learn anything you want. Things that you don't even realize are learnable skills. And a big one for a lot of guys is actually dating, for example. Dating is a learnable skill. Obviously, I talk a lot about studying, which is very much a learnable skill. Public speaking, which was one of my greatest fears up through college, right? Until medical school when I got over it, learnable skill. Becoming a better driver. Driving stick shift. I've taught So many people had to drive stick shift in the last couple of years in my car because it's just so fun, and people have this like mental like, oh no, I couldn't do that, it's too complicated. Try it, look, it's gonna be fine. You're actually gonna enjoy the process too. The other principle I wanna mention is the importance of self-esteem, or you can bullshit other people. You can try to wordsmith your way out of trouble, but deep down, you cannot bullshit yourself. You will always know the truth. And for that reason, if you act in ways that you don't actually respect, that you don't believe are aligned with your highest integrity, you're gonna lose self-esteem. You're not gonna feel good about yourself. So even if you can get away with this or that, don't do it. And I'm not saying this from like a moral high ground, you should be better than, like, don't do it, because logically, you're better off doing the right thing. You'll have higher self-esteem, you'll feel better about yourself, and then obviously that compounds in so many different ways in your life. Personal. After going number 2, do you nicely fold up the toilet paper or do you just crunch it up YOLO? This is probably my favorite question on this whole AMA. Yo, dude, stop being a Neanderthal and get a bidet. I got the Toto washlet that like warm water, even oscillates, blow dries. I don't know why America isn't on the bidet wagon, because like, if you had dirt on your driveway, would you take paper towels or spray it with a hose? Obviously a hose. But to answer your question, kind of a combination of the two. I like fold it, but also like scrunch it up YOLO, you know? Would you consider practicing medicine in the future, example as a general practitioner? Nah. Any chance you ever go back and finish/restart a residency, even in a different field? Nope. Making that decision was the single hardest decision of my life. I loved plastics, I loved entrepreneurship, 2 great options. Now that I'm on the other side and I see the possibilities, and I see like, in hindsight, it's actually funny to me that it was such a difficult decision, because I love my current life and there's so many things that I want to do. I mean, I'm just getting started, man. Like Med School Insiders and MEM and BlueLink. I got so many other businesses that I want to start. Has going back to school for something like an MBA or PhD crossed your mind? It did very briefly when I was getting really into BlueLink, the biomedical incubator. Some people were saying, hey, get an MBA. And I was like, you know, I feel like I can learn these things from books and stuff. And then after speaking to a few mentors, they essentially affirmed that. They're like, yeah, you don't need an MBA. MBA is for networking. If you want to actually learn this stuff, you learn by doing. And I definitely agree with that. You learn by doing, not by just studying in a classroom and things like that. When did you discover that you were really smart / could be really successful? This goes back to our life principle question, right? Which is, more often than not, the thing that's holding you back is not your circumstances, it's not your intelligence, it's not anything like that, things that you cannot change, at least in the moment. I mean, you could actually change those things long term, but it's primarily yourself. So if you believe in yourself, if you believe, hey, I can learn this, hey, I can do this, then you will exceed your own expectations. Are you an introvert or extrovert? I am an extrovert, which is probably why, the beginning of COVID was so insanely difficult for me. I made some videos about it and I had to like get really structured and regimented to have like some semblance of like normalcy in my life, but not hanging out with people. I was still on infliximab, which is an immunosuppressive, and I'm actually not at increased risk with COVID. But back then, we didn't know that, the data wasn't out. So I was like getting groceries delivered, not hanging out with anyone, not cuddling. Like it was isolating, man. It was really isolating. But yeah, I'm actually an ENTJ on Myers-Briggs. I'm Enneagram type 3. And then in terms of 4 tendencies, I'm a questioner with some upholder like shift or tilt. What steps do you take when you learn something for the first time? I really like this question, and I hadn't actually reflected on how I learned something for the first time. And it's kind of different for everything, right? So right now I've been obsessing about tea. If you haven't seen already, check out my Instagram or TikTok, because tea is this beautiful, underrated thing that most Americans don't appreciate, because I think in America we want like high amplitude, immediacy. We don't appreciate nuance. We don't appreciate patience. And so coffee is like, bam, caffeine, straight to your veins, and you feel good. Tea is like, I feel like kind of elevated, and there's L-theanine to help calm you down so you're not super wired. It's not like packed with sugar. I just have straight green, oolong, black, pu'er tea, and you don't add anything. You just have good quality tea, and it tastes amazing. But it's kind of like drinking scotch, for example. There's all these subtleties, and you don't just like want to pow it with sugar to overpower it. So anyways, I digress. The way I learned about tea was just immersing myself. So I will surround myself with content about that subject. So on YouTube, I'll start following YouTube channels that are about tea. On Reddit, I'll subscribe to the subreddits about tea. And then I'll just go and try to learn in person too. So I found a great tea shop in Las Vegas where I befriended the owner and have been nerding out with him quite a bit. And then I invest a lot of time and energy. So I bought a lot of tea and I bought a lot of different teaware, and I've been experimenting and documenting and even like keeping a spreadsheet of all the different teas I've tried, what I like, what I don't like, the temperatures, etc. And now I feel like I know 70% of all there is to know about tea, and I still want to get, higher than that 80, 85, 90. But I think that rapid early phase of learning that's super accelerated, so much fun. So much fun. With something else like business or, let's say business, I generally will read a few basics. I'll read some books, some blog posts, same thing, try to immerse myself in content, but then I'll also do it. So I guess the main thing is immerse myself in content so I am passively consuming it, and maybe even subscribe to some newsletters. But then the main thing is like, you always have to start doing. You can't just keep reading. You have to actually take action, because that accelerates your learning way more than anything else. Which country you want to travel to after the pandemic is over? I had a trip to Japan planned right before the pandemic. So like January 28th to February 15th last year. I was gonna go to Japan. I planned it out, had a couple friends joining me. I was so excited. I was like, hey guys, let's go here and there, and great food, and I've never been to Japan. But then COVID was breaking out in Asia, and things were fine in the US, but I talked to my doctor. I was like, hey man, I'm on infliximab, I'm immunosuppressed, should I do it? And he's like, yeah, you probably shouldn't. So I canceled the trip, which was unfortunate. All my friends went, of course, as they should, because they're not immunosuppressed, and if I was them, I would have gone as well. But in the post-COVID world, I'll be going to Japan first. If you got to be any type of doctor for a day, what doctor would you be? Come on, that's easy. Rocket surgeon, your most outrageous YouTube comment. So there was a video where I was sitting in my mom's backyard, back then. I think it was why I quit plastic surgery. And this guy wrote the funniest comment. It's like really long. And it's like, yeah, based on your chin angle and this and that, and like, it was just super long, and like your eyelid shape and the aperture degree, I calculate that your pee-pee. I thought it was the funniest thing. That like really spoke to my inner child. I was just laughing so hard off of that. Health. To what effect did you hide having Crohn's on your med school apps? On my med school apps, I included it because IBD was a huge factor that motivated me to pursue medicine. I want to become a gastroenterologist. When applying to residency, oh hell no. It was nowhere in sight. No one except for like my best friend and my girlfriend at the time even knew I had IBD, right? I had to keep it under wraps, because if you're going into something surgical and something competitive, then that's only going to be used against you, because now you're a liability. If you have a flare during residency, oh, now you need to take time off, right? They don't like that. Something super competitive like plastics, cool, you got this? Well, let me get someone else who's equally qualified, who doesn't have any condition that's gonna be a liability. Since you have a chronic GI thing, which other category of chronic illness would you rather have? Dude, amor fati, love the fate that you're given. This has totally transformed who I am, right? I was this little shit when I was 17 years old starting college, and then I had to grow up really fast because a lot of tough things happened, including the health, and like I eat healthier now as a result. My IBD is super well managed. The crazy thing is I am now prioritizing my health much more so than if I didn't have any GI illness. So I put this on my Instagram story. In April, I used the Oura Ring to track my sleep. And in April, it tracked like 8 hours of sleep per night on average, which is insane. For me to go a full month and on average have 8 hours every single night is unheard of, So amor fati, love your fate. Are you on any meds for your Crohn's? Yes, I am on infliximab, AKA Remicade, which I've been on since 2011 or 10? 2010. On to relationships. Are you single? Are you single? Do you like being single? Are you still in a relationship? How do you balance your relationship with all your work? Am I single? Possibly, depends on who's asking. So look, I'm a pretty structured person, so in terms of balancing relationship with work, what it comes down for me primarily is setting up things in my life to make sure I don't overwork and then not give enough time to the relationship, because that would be my tendency. I do have some workaholic tendencies, which have very much been improved over the last few years. Yeah, like having a protected date night, planning trips, having meals, and like really being present with one another. Things like that help a lot. But a big part of it too is finding someone who respects that, yeah, you're gonna be working. Like, I'm never gonna be working only 40 hours a week, at least not in the near future. So it's also important for me to find a partner who is understanding of that. That says, hey, you know, Kevin's gonna work a little bit longer than the average person, but that's part of who Kevin is. All right, guys, so brief intermission. It is now night of the day I recorded this, but I realized I forgot one important thing I wanted to share with you, which is about relationships. So the reason I like talking about relationships a lot is because I think First of all, I've given a lot of thought to this, and it's one of the most important decisions you make, right? Assuming that you end up with one person long term, then that decision, as much as I talk about the compounding effect, that has such a tremendous compounding effect on your life. Like imagine you end up with the one person and they change your trajectory by 2 degrees, 2%, right? The first year, small difference. The year after that, after that, it just keeps compounding. The next thing you know, 20 years later, you're like way over here versus way over here, which is why it's so important that you spend enough time and energy thinking about relationships, assuming that's what you want. Now, one thing that I think a lot of young people don't appreciate is the idea that you can either pursue a relationship, which is the kind of normal thing to do, the popular thing to do, or you can just be single for the rest of your life, or for most of your life. And I have a few friends who have been single for a long period of time. They're now in their 30s, early, mid, late 30s even, and they're very good at being single. But what you'll find is that those who end up being single and end up pursuing being single long term, there's no forcing function that's maintaining their integrity, if that makes sense. So when you are in a relationship, in a committed long-term relationship with one person, you can't really escape your own bullshit, if that makes sense. So if you have conflict, if you have some issues that your own pain bodies, your own bullshit is actually causing, you're forced to face that and confront it and work through it and deal with it. Whereas if you are single and you start having any issues or things come up, you'll be like, on to the next. I'm done with this person. Let me go back on those dating apps, or let me go back to the club, or let me, do whatever. Let me find someone else so I don't have to deal with it. There's no forcing function that's causing you to actually grow as a person. Now, I'm not saying you can't grow and evolve and improve as a single person. That's totally possible. But this is one thing that I don't think enough people realize is a benefit to being in a relationship. After residency, I actually wasn't even sure if I was going to be in a long-term committed relationship, because I was like, rather than just accepting the social narrative, why don't I decide for myself what I want, right? And it was only after a lot of experimentation and introspection and just like living life and trying different things, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I think I do want to be in a committed relationship long term. And not everyone has to do that, right? I'm not saying that one is right or wrong, but go in eyes wide open and really understand what are the pros and cons of each, because being single versus being in a relationship, it's not just a matter of like the first kind of obvious things that you think about in terms of pros and cons, but there's also deeper level implications. For example, the forcing function with integrity and self-development and growth. Anyways, back to the regularly scheduled programming. Food, favorite cuisine. Lebanese is the best already, but I'll let you choose second place. I love that. Japanese, specifically sushi, and Thai food. Those are my two favorite. Tacos or sushi. Sushi most days, but I appreciate some good tacos, especially when you're in San Diego. What made you introduce meat back into your diet? Okay, so the reason I started the plant-based diet and I was vegan for almost 5 years was because health, right? I've been experimenting with my diet since the beginning, since 2009 when I first got IBD. And that's been the specific carbohydrate diet, that's been keto, that's been gluten-free, that's been vegan, or plant-based primarily. That's like been a lot of things. So essentially my theory was, hey, let me try reintroducing meat and see what happens. Because if you're just on a plant-based diet and you never reintroduce meat, you won't actually know what's changed. So when I reintroduced meat into my diet, I felt totally fine. I felt fantastic. And what I realized is that prior to plant-based, so when I first started plant-based, I felt really good, which I think was because I eliminated dairy. I was having way too much dairy before, like in the form of yogurt and milk. And by reducing my dairy intake, which now I have very occasionally, I'm fine. My IBD currently is the best controlled it has ever been, and I also have the least restrictive diet right now. I prioritize healthy, whole foods that are not processed, but I'll eat some dairy, I'll eat some meat, fish. I believe it's primarily a function of prioritizing my sleep, exercise, and stress, and everything else just falls into place. All right, cars, JDM or American Muscle. JDM all the way. The 1990s was the golden era of the Japanese sports car, and I grew up with that stuff. I mean, I was obsessed with cars since like 1993 when I was 3 years old, so JDM all the way. If you had 70K, which car would you get? Stretch that budget a little bit, Cayman GT4, but maybe I need to get something more practical because I already have my FRS as my track toy. So maybe I get like a GV70 or maybe a used LC500, which is not practical, but just like so comfy and so beautiful and sounds amazing. I don't know. What's your next car? Don't know yet. I have been loving my current car. It's not the most comfortable on these longer road trips, like driving to San Diego, for example, but that car does everything. I track it, I go to Costco with it. I can even fit small IKEA furniture because you can fold down the back seats. It's practical, it's fun. Everyone obsesses over like horsepower and these meaningless metrics which don't actually add to your engagement. I would rather drive a slow car fast, like my car that's super engaging, beautiful steering feel, versus some large numb car. No hate on some of the American muscle cars, but when I was driving a Mustang a couple years ago, I was like, you know what? This thing feels so heavy. I don't really have steering feel. The engine is great. The engine is way better than in my car, but I definitely take my car any day because of the engagement and the joy of driving. I don't really care about flexing on people when it comes to my car. But yeah, there are also a lot of American cars like the Camaro ZL1 that's just fantastic, and especially on the track, but I haven't driven that. And then the homie David Hinden asks, when are you getting your first car sponsor, dude? Dude, I wish. That'd be awesome. If there's any companies out there that want to do a car sponsorship, hit me up. All right, guys, that is it. Thanks for sending in your questions. I love doing these. They're so much fun. And if you want to ask me questions in the next AMA, follow me on Instagram. As always, links to everything discussed are down in the description. Much love, and I'll see you guys next time.